What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stucky.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
Welcome to Buckets, brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. I'm joined by Brandon Anderson. He's NBA futures analyst. We're going to do our division preview for the Atlantic Division with the reigning NBA champion Boston Celtics, the Philadelphia 76ers with Paul George, the New York Knicks with Mikal Bridges because they needed another wing that could switch, and the Toronto Raptors, and, of course, the Brooklyn Nets. We'll give you best bets on these teams. We'll do deep dives. We'll give you our projections, all of those. You can find this content very soon in the Action Network app, which you should download right now. If you're a bettor, which you should be if you're listening to the show, it's what most of our audience is, and you haven't downloaded it yet because you're like, yeah, I hear him talk about it, mess around with it for 10 minutes, and you're going to find something that you really like in it. You're going to find projections on props. You're going to find projections. You're going to find picks from our analysts, guys like Sean Kerner, guys like Sean Zerillo for baseball, guys like Nick Giffen for baseball, Brandon's NBA futures. You're going to find awesome stuff in there, and you're going to be glad that you did. So go ahead and start that now by downloading the Action Network app. You can check out all of our content at youtube.com/The Action Network. I also want to give a shout out to Big Bets on Campus, which has its own podcast channel. If you like college content, college football, I can't wait for the start of college football. Hey, MIZ, number 11 in the country. That's definitely not going to go badly for me. You should check out the Big Bets on Campus podcast. I learned so much stuff from Stucky and Colin just every single time. All right, Brandon, let's get into this. We're going to do the Atlantic Division. We are not going to go in order of like top team to bottom team like a lot of your division previews. We basically have structured this in a combination of like, how much do we want to talk about it? How much do we want to bet on it? Where are we at with this? All right, Brandon, let's get into it. We're going to start with the New York Knicks because the Knicks made the biggest move of the offseason, trading all of their first rounders, I think, for Mikal Bridges as they lose Isaiah Hartenstein. He heads to Oklahoma City. Lots of questions about it. As we do on these previews, we're going to do 10 words that we think encapsulate our positions on these, plus whether it's a bet, lean, or pass. What are your 10 words for the Knicks?
All that for a drop of blood. Give me the under 53.5 multi-unit bet. I'm out.
Everything clicked last year, and they changed the mechanism. I'm on an under 52.5 3-unit bet as well here. We are in alignment on this one. I'll set the stage with where the market's at. The current win total is 52.9. There's a split between 52.5 and 53.5 now. It's moving up. This one's headed towards 53.5. I wouldn't be shocked if preseason goes well if this hits 54.5, in which case I might hit it again. Division is plus 350. You can get Knicks, Celtics in either order to lead the division at minus 115. If you want Celtics 1, Knicks 2, that's plus 175. Their seeding number is really interesting. It's 3.5 plus 105 to the over, minus 125 to the under. That makes sense on surface. I'm just a little bit surprised that there's as much confidence in them in these division kind of numbers, and yet the seeding is still where this is at. 1 seed, if you want to bet them to actually get past the Celtics, plus 4, and I guess everybody else, plus 475. If you want to bet them to miss the playoffs, you want to go the exact opposite way, it's plus 1,500, 15 to 1. Play-in tournament for the Knicks, for them to finish 7th through 10th, is plus 600. Brandon, give me the big picture look at the New York Knicks.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of know the big picture on this team, right? This was one of the big stories of the offseason. So you mentioned it. They went all in. They went out. They traded all the draft picks and then a few more draft picks. They got Mikal Bridges. They kept OG Anunoby. It looked a little shaky for a bit there. They paid him a lot of dollars. I think they overpaid on both of those. I think they paid a whole lot for Mikal. I think they paid by contract a whole lot for Anunoby. I have that as a top 5 worst contract in the league. I go through each offseason and I rank forwards, not just first team, second team, third team. I go all the way to 30. I put them all in order. I had McHale 14th team All-NBA and OG 15th team All-NBA. That's probably a little crazy. That seems a little much among forwards. But like notably, I had Cameron Johnson, McHale's teammate, 15th team. I have RJ Barrett, the guy OG got traded for, 16th team. That's not enough of an upgrade to trade all of the stuff and all the money. Now look, I think they built this team for the Celtics. You want McHale, you want OG to go defend Tatum and Brown. I think it fits theoretically. There are 28 other teams in the league also, and I'm not sure how the pieces fit together. We'll have a lot to say about it. There's a lot to like here. There's a lot that I don't like also. I think we kind of know the stage with the Knicks. We've been talking about them all summer, so we just got to jump into it.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do what we like and dislike about this team. I'll start. Look, they lose Isaiah Hartenstein, who was one of the most impactful players in basketball last season. Mitchell Robinson was playing really well for them, and they were still good when they had Mitchell Robinson as the starter. If you're a Buckets longtime listener, you'll remember that Joe and Jim and I were talking about the value on betting Mitchell Robinson for DPOY. It wasn't like he's like really going to win it, but it was more this number is off and there's like a chance that he could get into that conversation based on where they're at. They were 8th in offense, 8th in defense. So they had a really good balance here. They went 14-2 in January, kind of when Mitchell Robinson went down. That's what kind of unlocked them was Hartenstein. Going to come back to that. Part of the thing I just really like about them, honestly, so they have a couple of things going for them. One, Jalen Brunson just might be good enough to get 50 wins on his own. He was one of the top 5 players in EPM last season. Top 7 in EPM last season. He is a hugely impactful player. He makes everybody better. He is a beast. He's just a demon to kind of keep down. And there's just a lot of games where it's like he's just going to kill you. And when you have those type of guys, you are going to have a chance at 50 wins. So that's a reason I think to really like them. The Bridges addition, I think, is, if you think of it from I talk about this all the time, do you want versatility or do you want redundancy or do you want both? It adds both of those categories. They can do a lot more with lineup versatility by adding Bridges, depending on how small you want to go. And it adds a lot of redundancy. OG gets hurt a lot. OG misses a lot of games. And so having McHale, who's a lot more stable and doesn't miss as many games, I think really gets it involved. There's also the chemistry aspect here. Obviously, he's in with those guys, knows them, loves them. They're all friends. Team Villanova, like it's all very fun. And that chemistry impact can be really, really great for how they're going to get along. Like the vibe should be really good. They were really good last season. Again, we'll get to that. But like there's a lot of things to kind of think here in terms of how good they are. I'll be honest with you, Brandon. I have a really hard time with this team because it's not that my model ignores half-court offensive rebounds. It's just that it always kind of seems to fail to account for how the Knicks succeed because of the way that they play. So a lot of my projections, I'm not that confident in because it just seems like the Knicks play a style of basketball that the way I do projections has a glaring hole that I haven't been able to solve for yet. So, I'm open to the idea that they're just better flat out than my projection, which is the baseline for how I'm making these bets. There are other reasons and the bigger parts of my cap, but they're just better than that. And they find ways to win. They find ways to be 8th in offense and 8th in defense. So there's probably they're just probably better than I think they are. And those are the reasons that I like them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, look, we like the Knicks. I want to watch the Knicks this year. I want to watch a lot of Knicks basketball. They're fun. The Nova Knicks are back. They're a fun team. The NBA is better when the Knicks are good. So I like the Knicks. I'm about to say plenty of negative things about them soon, but look, I think they have a very strong 7-man rotation. So that's what you like about them, at least in the playoffs. When we get there, you got Brunson, McHale, OG, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson. That's probably the starters. Then you get to bring Dante DiVincenzo off the bench this year with Josh Hart. So you get the whole Nova connection. You've got all the guys in the starting lineup like that. Like you said, versatility, shot making. You get Randall back. That raises the floor offensively for this season. I have my qualms with Randall, but I think adding some shot creation, adding his floor in the regular season is important. And we know Tibbs. We know Tibbs is going to play these dudes. Now I'm a little worried because he's going to play them a lot. And we just saw him play them a lot. and we saw them wear down at the end of a long season and a long playoff run. But that does set a pretty good floor in a regular season, which is what we're focusing on here, getting some wins. You're going to play 7 really good players a lot. You're going to get a bunch of wins. So I think there is a lot of floor to like here, where the floor is very high with good players, at getting Randall back, getting Mitchell Robinson back. Number 1 offensive rebounds. Again, that's another floor thing. They've kind of cracked a code as far as offensive rating. Like I look, I'm big on the 4 factors. Rebounding is one of them. They don't do well at the other 3. They're not good at EFG. They're not great at turnovers or free throws. Their only thing, their one weapon is number 1 offensive rebounds. Now, I'm a little scared because Les Hartenstein and the way the roster is built, I think is a little smaller. I don't know if they can stay number 1 offensive rebound. I don't know. Maybe Josh Hart just gets 50 in a game like he did all playoffs. Good for Josh. But I think they've found a formula that works there, and there's a lot of floor to like. It's the ceiling that I'm not as certain about. So what don't you like about the Knicks this year?
I am with you on this. I think the floor is very high. Like I have them projected at 49.7. Like I have them as like a 50-win team. I think their floor is like, if a bunch of stuff went wrong, is like 44. A reasonable outcome with a bunch of like, it wasn't great. It was like 46. Like a lot of this is like the number, like everyone's in on the Knicks. And we think that that's probably a little bit much based off of the additions. So you kind of mentioned Mikal. Mikal was sneakily not great last year. He was a minus 1.9 EPM. Hart was plus 2.6. So it's not just and you can be like, well, that was last year with the Nets. Okay. So he needs to go back to how he was with CP3 and Booker. Is this team as good as those Suns that were the number 1 seed in the Western Conference? Like, I don't think so. Do I think Jalen Brunson is on the level of where Devin Booker and CP3 were at that point? Yeah, but they had a number 2, like they had each other. Like it was like a number 1 and a number 2. And then also, Mikal was the number 3 guy with Ayton as kind of like the front court dude. The Knicks aren't like that. That's not how they're built, unless you're like, oh, it's OG. OG is the number 2. Okay, well, I don't like that comparison because I'm like, Brunson and OG is worse than Booker and CP3. And I'm not trying to like do, pluses and minuses here, but it's also just like, there's a lot of redundancy here. There's just so much redundancy. So he was a plus 0.8 defensive player on the wing in defensive EPM. That's great. Like he was really good defensively still on the wing. His offensive stuff is where he struggled because he was 27th percentile at the rim. OG was 99th percentile in defensive EPM last year. Hart was 83rd percentile. It's true that you have redundancy in case those guys miss games, but I don't know what's additive about Mikal. Like I'm with you in this concept of I don't know what Mikal brings to the table that makes them better than last year. Like he shores up what was good about them, but I don't know that he makes them better. You mentioned the Celtics thing. They do. They match up way better with Boston. We'll see that on opening night, maybe. But what about the rest of the league? What about all these teams with double bigs? What about all these teams that play differently? What about all these teams that have different ways that they play? I'm concerned about all those. Players bought into that Tibbsism hard, like Josh Hart defending Tibbs to the bitter end. But there's also a clock on that, man. Like we have a long history of guys getting worn out with Tibbs being the guy. They were 19th in half-court offense last season, 10th in half-court defense. They win a little bit on the margins. Like that's how they win. That to me is like the story of this team. And I don't want to trust a squad like that. What don't you like about it that I haven't hit? Because I know I hit a lot of your points there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I'll chime in on some of the same things. I really worry that Tibbs is just not the right coach for this team. Like we've talked a lot about the flexibility that this roster gives. Totally does. Does Tibbs unlock that flexibility? I'm not so sure about that part. Like Tibbs has been what he has been because he has his formula. He does what works. And I don't know. I could see a scenario where if things don't go well for the Knicks, that you got to make a change. You're all in on this team. And I think Tibbs could be the change that needs to happen. You need like a fresher mind here. I don't know. Like his thing is built on getting you to try really hard, playing you a lot, and a really good defense with his style of defense. Well, his style of defense has finished 10th or worst each of the last 3 years. So now you've got better defenders here, but they're not really the Tibbs sort of defenders. Tibbs defense typically lives and dies by the big men. Now, I think Mitch is very good if Mitch is healthy and playing. I don't know if Mitch is healthy and playing, and I don't know if we're going to get that. And the big man depth is really worrisome here. Precious, he's all right. He's not the guy I want second on my roster for big men. He's certainly not the guy I want starting like 40 games when Mitch is out. Sims, I think, is a fine third center. Are we playing Julius Randle at center sometimes? That's not going to be great for defense. Right. So we lose Isaiah Hartenstein, who was awesome. I had him second team all defense. I thought he was fantastic. I thought him and Dante DiVincenzo were the second and third best players on this team last year, based on how they played. Well, we're not getting Hartenstein, and now we're going to get less Dante because more Randall means less Dante. And like the lineup, I have a hard time kind of figuring out where do the lineups go. Like you talked about, what does Mikal add? Well, I actually wonder, what does Randall add? Like I know what he adds offensively, but with what he adds, you've got to have a spot for him on the court. So now who's coming off and what are you taking away to add the Randall thing? Like, I think Randall is an additive player. You want guys like Mikal and OG because they're like more multiplying players, but you can't play everyone together. And don't forget, the Knicks didn't just lose Hartenstein either. They lost RJ Barrett, who quietly was very good for Toronto. We'll come back to that. They lost Quickly, who's been fantastic. They lost Grimes. They have long succeeded on this great bench play that is kind of down to like two guys now. Like we remember the playoffs, we were playing like a 6-man lineup. There was nobody left coming in for New York. Now I know there were injuries, but now we lost a couple of guys. So I don't have the Knicks top 10 on offense or on defense. I have them just outside. If you're not top 10 offense or defense, there's not a high ceiling there. You can't be a 54-win team without a top 10 offense or defense.
If they were to trade Randall, we're going to feel pretty differently because the odds are that they would trade him for depth. They're probably not trading him for another star after trading for Mikal. So if they trade Randall and they get like a backup center and a backup point guard and like, I don't know, somebody else that can kind of slide in, like a serviceable power forward who doesn't need to start, then we'll feel differently and we'll have to kind of deal with that. From where we're at right now, I agree that there's just like a lot with it. So much of this for me also is kind of an ephemeral thing where I'm like, yeah, no, the chemistry was awesome. The vibes were off the chart last year. Go New York, go New York, go. All of our Action Network colleagues were so excited for this team. Fun. It's hard to keep that up, man. You change things. And it's like, well, yeah, but they changed it more towards the villain. I don't care. Like, you change things. You shifted things. This isn't the same team. And even year over year, it's hard to keep the same chemistry. So, like, I just wonder, like, what's that going to be like? If somebody loses minutes, is the locker room vibe going to be the same? I think it's hard to say that. Some numbers for you for just some trends. Now, if you're like, well, wait, you guys have taken overs on some of these other episodes. You're absolutely right, but we try and mention them. Like, yeah, you need to know what you're getting into. Going over these 50-plus numbers is hard. Win totals of 52.5 or more, 32 and 18 to the under. That's 64%. If you won 50 or fewer, so you didn't get over 50 wins last year and your win total is north of 52, 13 and 4 to the under in the last 14 seasons. A win total of 52.5 or greater, and the win total is higher than where you were at previously. Because, like, think about that. Knicks won 50 last year. This is 52.5. So if you're up there in that range and you didn't win that many last year, 18 and 9, 67% to the under. If you move it to 50, it's 21, 11 and 1, still at 64%. Again, there's just like a very solid trend that there are very few teams that have the profile of squads that go over with a win total this high. We'll get to one of them in a minute, but that's the kind of the problem that I've got on it. So I think we're in agreement on the under. Are there any alts that you want? Anything else that you want on the Knicks before we move on?
Yeah, just some of my numbers. I have them 11th offense, 12th defense, net plus 2.5, so 47 wins. Tibbs teams consistently also go under expected wins by a win or two most years. That kind of checks out with the defense first profile. New York has been by pace or by actual win total, because obviously we had some shortened seasons. They've been at 46 to 50 wins out of 3 of the last 4 years. It's not up yet that I've seen. Sometimes we get those win bands. I'd love to bet a New York Knicks 45 to 50 win band. Like, give me just right in that thing. Give me the floor and the ceiling. Trap them right in that spot. That's what I'd like to bet on the Knicks. I have them at 45 to 51 is where I project them. 47 median outcome. So I think it's a floor ceiling play. I think the number itself, the 53.5, I just genuinely thought it was the wrong number. I had to look twice and look again and make sure it was the number I was seeing. And like you said, it might still go up if the money comes in. We've talked about the Lakers tax. There's always the Lakers tax every year. The Knicks are good. I think we're getting a Knicks tax. I think this should be like a 50, 51.5, somewhere in that range. I think we're getting a Knicks tax here, and people are still betting it because the Knicks are fun and you want to bet on the Knicks. I want the Knicks to be fun and good. I also want the under 53.5. So it's one of my favorite bets on just straight win totals.
They can be really good and not hit this over.
Agreed.
They were really good last year and didn't hit this number. So, yeah, I like the under here, 3-unit play on the Knicks, under 53.5. All right, let's go to the Raptors. So the Raptors obviously finally gave up the ghost last year. They traded OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam. They tanked at the end of the season, and especially after Scotty Barnes got hurt. What's your 10 words on the Toronto Raptors?
Floor and ceiling, both better than you think, eh? Over 29.5. Give me the bet on the over and give me the escalator. 35 wins, 40 wins. I am in on Team Canada.
Mine's interesting, but we need a vibe check. I lean over. I'm going to wait till preseason. That's my play on this team is I want to do a preseason vibe check on this team. I'll set the stage. Win total is 30.3. There's a couple that are a little bit lower, but it's mostly 30.5s in the market. Playoffs, they're 6-1 to make the playoffs, minus 900 to miss. Play-in is plus 165, which is a little bit surprising to me. I like that number quite a bit. 35 plus wins is plus 265. 40 plus wins is plus 750. So if you think they'll be decent, you got some real runway here for an escalator. Their seeding is 11.5 plus 115 to the over, minus 140 to the under. So they are kind of expected to be bad, but it's really kind of interesting here where like the play-in's plus 165, but the seeding under is minus 140. I thought that was like an interesting kind of comparison there. Okay, give me the big picture look at where the Raptors are at, particularly when it comes to the draft.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of set up the big picture. So Siakam's gone, OG's gone, Van Vliet is gone, Gary Trent Jr. is gone. They waited too long, right? We know. We waited too long. We don't have a lot to show for it now. They didn't get anything for Freddie. They didn't get anything for Gary Trent. They got some kind of mid-first for Siakam. They also waited too long on something else. You mentioned the draft. Last year, they needed to tank to keep their top 6 protected pick from the Jakob Poeltl trade. They finished 2-19. They didn't start soon enough. They lost the pick. They didn't get the pick that the Spurs ended up trading. I think it would end up being the Dillingham pick that went to Minnesota. That was supposed to be a Toronto Raptors player, so they don't have that pick. However, the upside is they got their picks now. So that is extinguished. They own their picks. That does mean if they tank this year, they get to keep it. But it also means they don't need to tank to try to keep a pick. They can just kind of get the pick as it comes. They finished 2-19. They started 23-38. Now, that's not great, but it's a 37-win pace. Like, they threw everything out. I think it really tanked the numbers and the profile and really kind of our opinion. Like, this nasty taste in our mouth, right? Toronto just was awful at the end of the year. And so it's a strange team. You said kind of a vibe check. It feels like a roster in progress, right? Like, it feels like they kind of just got what they could from some of these trades, and they've got some pieces that don't make a ton of sense. Now, I do think they went out, they got some shooting. Last year, they added like Kelly Olynyk. It feels like they're trying to find some things that fit and make sense here, but maybe not quite there yet, right? Masai's still cooking a little bit. But I have a lot of things I like about this team. This is one of my longest what I like sections. So I'm going to let you go first. You probably hit a few of mine. I'll fill in the rest. What do you like about Toronto this year?
So Barnes, quickly, Barrett, Poeltl, that 4-man combo, and we're going to hear a lot. You're going to hear a lot of RJ Barrett talk on this podcast, which I don't think we would have expected at the end of the season to be like, what are you going to talk about in the Atlantic preview? If we'd been like RJ Barrett, why? They were plus 10.3. They had a really good net rating in the few minutes that they were able to play together, but they also didn't play like no minutes to where this was an irrelevant sample. They went 4-6 in that span because the bench was so bad. Again, there's a little bit of like, I think, tanking in the middle of that. RJ, again, you're going to hear a lot about him, but I'll give you the baseline stats. 22 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, 55% from the field, 36% from 3, 72% from the line. Really good numbers.
So they're just Toronto numbers, yeah?
Yeah. With Scotty, they went 22-8. At one point, no, I'm sorry, that's not wrong. 22-18. They were very close to being within range for it to be within range of this kind of win pace. They had a minus 3.4 point differential. The shot location profile is really good. I have a lot of questions about Darko, but I think if you look at the shot location and use that as a judge for coaching, they generated the right shots. They forced the right shots. They got bad luck on both ends. They couldn't hit anything, and the other team hit a lot of things. So also, Scotty Barnes is a monster. Like, he's better, I think, than people realize. I was kind of like, come on, last season with a bunch of Raptors fans, and they wound up being right about how good he was. So I'm like a convert to the Scotty Barnes way. I really do think he's going to be awesome as a primary engine. Those are the things I like. What else you got?
Yeah, I was with you on Scotty. I was very skeptical until I kind of did the offseason deep dive, and I was like, all right, well, was he really the most improved player out there? I know he didn't win, but he was in the mix all the way. I think he probably might have won, except that he ran out of games, so he didn't qualify anymore. Scotty improved on assists, defensive rebounds, blocks, free throw rates, true shooting, usage. All of those things went up. Now, I'm not totally sold on the shot. The shot looked great in the fall when he got a lot of the hype, and then it fell off. That's not really ever been a Scotty thing. So I'm not sold on that part yet, but he's a star. He's really good. He's still really young. I mentioned earlier, things didn't go well in a lot of the moves. They didn't get great stuff from Freddie and Siakam and whatever. The one thing I didn't mention, I think they quietly did pretty well on the OG Anunoby trade. They got RJ Barrett. You talked about RJ, 62% true shooting in Toronto, by far his best. The big thing I see different, a little more assists, but he just had way more twos and on way better 2-point percentage. They just used him in a very different way, and he was a very positive player. And if you have ever heard me talk about RJ Barrett and positive, those are not sentences or words I put in the same sentence. This is a guy I've spoken of like Wiggins or Jordan Poole. Like this is the group I've put him in. He was different than that in Toronto. We'll see if it sticks. Quickly, I was also skeptical about. He looked fantastic for New York all those years, but off the bench, you put him in bigger minutes as a starter against tougher competition, the numbers held up. They checked out. His assists went up. He's more playmaking. So suddenly now you get Scotty and you get more of them because he missed last year. You get more games from RJ and Quick because they only got half a season from them. And you really only lost 66 games from Siakam and OG. I have them adding in 85 games approximately from Scotty, RJ, and Quickly. So you're adding more than you lost. You're adding a full player. 85 games is a full season of a good player, of combination of those. And you got more Olynyk. You got more Pirtle, who missed some time last year. Probably a little more Agbaji or Bruce Brown. They added Davion Mitchell. There's just a lot of talent coming in here compared to the minutes that they had last year. We don't know about Darko yet. I do think that he showed pretty good player development last year. And that's a thing we don't really know how to apportion to a coach. But I don't think it's a mistake that we saw Scotty and RJ and Quickly do so well. Something about either Darko or the system there is working. So I think actually offensively, there's a lot of room to grow here. There's a lot of floor that got added in with those guys. There's better spacing. If you look at the East, now you're going to disagree with one of these teams, but in the East, you got Washington and Brooklyn. Toronto is clearly better than those teams. I think they're clearly better than Charlotte and Chicago. I think they're better than Detroit. You may not agree with that one, but that's 5 teams. 15 teams in the East, take 5 teams you're worse than, you're in the play-in now. And if you're in the play-in, if you're in the top 10, you're like a decent team and you're trying all the way. I don't think this is a tank team. I think this is a team that legitimately in the East can be a 500 team if they push all the way there. I think there's a lot of influx of talent. I don't really know how it fits on a basketball court. There's just a lot better stuff than what they had last year.
So I think one of the things is I think you've gone a little bit too far, even with the. I know the game's loss is important. Again, like I mentioned, OG gets hurt a lot, but hey, RJ and Quickly were better than you thought. They could be better than we think, and still way worse than Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. And that team was still only about 500. And so that's kind of I think that's a significant part of the argument here is but you need another big leap from RJ and another big leap from Quickly and for Scotty to be at the level last season. Oh, and by the way, this is one of the biggest problems when we get to what we don't like. They can't shoot at all.
They cannot shoot.
You want a crazy one? They had no shooters last season above 40% from 3.
Whew.
in major rotation. The closest was Quickly at 39.5. Nobody above 40%. That is catastrophic. And if you're like Grady Dick, okay, maybe.
Yeah,
Entirely
Agaji,
possible.
maybe.
Yeah, but like you got to get a bunch of guys to get back to league average. They were bad both half court offense and defense. They weren't good at anything last year, and like that's a real problem. And you could be like, well, they tanked. They did, and like they could move to league average in one of those and sub league average, not terrible in another, and be pretty decent, and still not be good. The depth is really rough. I don't love a lot of the guys in the pipeline. Like I just don't. I'm not over the moon. Maybe I feel differently by midseason, where I'm like, ooh, wow, they got like a bunch of guys I like now. They really have kind of made the leap there, but I don't like almost any of those guys. I've said all the things I don't like about them, and the problem is this number's 30.5, where like the under is an absolute no for me. I can't, like, there's no reason for me to take an under here at all. I cannot get under. Like it's, it would take, you mentioned all those other teams. It would take something happening right out of the gate. And look, this is possible that like they start out 1-11 and the season's over. Like it just goes that way. They're just one of those teams. They go 1-11 and the season's over and they pull the plug, you know, and that's before we get into like, well, Scotty got hurt, blah, 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 like all those things that we have to deal with every team. Right. So like, it would take that for me to get an under. I have no interest in an under. I only have interest in an over. But the Darko question, I think, is really important here. I want to see what they look like. Do they actually look like, oh no, like they figured out who this team is. And Darko's really gotten work on them, and they all came back better, and they click a little bit. I could see that in preseason, and that way I don't have to worry about it now. Like I want to wait till preseason, get a sense for it. If I like what I see, I'll bet the over. But it's not enough to get me like, yes, I'm absolutely sure, because this draft is so good. And if they find themselves where it's like, hey, we might be able to, like, some of these teams are better than we think, and they can like, hey, we might be able to sneak into that top 4 spot under, right? And they'll go that, and it might be a tight under even. But like that's like a way that we could get there. Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and wait. What do you not like about the Raptors?
Yeah, I just think to me there's just too much talent to even be anywhere in that conversation for a bottom 4 pick. Like you're right, maybe you just start 1-11. We'll have to check the schedule when it comes out. Maybe you're just shot from the beginning. You can't get out of the gates. And that happens sometimes. But I think otherwise they're just in a different conversation. The shooting thing too. I agree. The shooting is bad. I would like more shooting. I'd like you to be able to make a shot, NBA team. That would be nice. I do like that they seem like they're trying to do that. They traded for Olynyk, add some spacing. They traded for Agbaji, add some spacing. They drafted Grady Dick, add some spacing. Now, it hasn't really happened yet with those guys. I think even quickly, with Scotty, adding some shooting, some shot making, I think it makes sense. If you have Scotty and a traditional center like Pirtle, you need shooters around. They don't really have it yet, but they're trying. And that at least gives me a little bit of confidence of like, all right, I feel like I understand what they're trying to do here. I'm a little more worried about the defense, actually, than the offense. The defense last year, end of the season, they were dead last in that tanking part. So you got to kind of take those numbers out a little bit. But even before that, they were like 23rd, 24th. Like it wasn't great. It was not great. And they lost. I don't think they lost a lot offensively from Siakam and OG. I think they gained offensively. They definitely lost defensively. You take OG out of the mix, who's even been better in New York for sure, but take Siakam out. Like there's not a lot of reason for optimism here. Scotty, as a prospect, was supposed to be this like lockdown Kawhi type defender. That hasn't happened. And I think partly it hasn't happened maybe because you need more offense. You can't do everything. So maybe with more guys there, maybe you can do a little bit more of that. RJ was a passable defender for New York. Quickly is tiny. He's not going to be a great defender. So I think the defense has a pretty hard cap on the ceiling of what they can be. I have them 22nd on offense, 19th on defense. Now the numbers don't really make a lot of sense because I'm more optimistic offense than defense. It's just kind of where the rankings came out on where the teams end up. But effectively, I have them below average at everything. Below average offense, below average defense. The problem is they're not being priced below average. They're being priced as a bad tanking team, and that's what I'm playing here. So I have net rating -2. This is a 36-win team, 37-win team. So you mentioned some of the ways to play. 35 plus wins. I'm seeing a plus 325 on that. Playing is plus 165. To me, that's a non-starter. I don't need in the East, even in the East, I need 35 wins at least to get into the play-in. I'm pretty sure. Like, unless there's just 9 teams and then just like an absolute mud pit for the 10 seed, sure, maybe. But by my numbers, 36, 37 is the cutoff. Like Toronto, that's where I have them, like 9-10 seed range. So 35 wins at double the payout than the play-in. I think you need 35 wins to make the play-in anyway. So I'm out on the play-in. I see a plus 900 for 40 wins. I think that's pretty optimistic. I don't think it's probably going to happen. But for me, that's like an 80th, 85th percentile, 9-1 odds. I have to play that. I have to play that on the escalator. So this is not a team I thought I was anything excited about, but I like what they added. I like the pieces, and I have to bet the number, not the team. What numbers are you looking at here? Do you have any trends that stick out?
Not really. The trends I pulled on teams of their profile, they're basically like, yeah, they go under, but it's pretty close. It's just basically like there's nothing really significant for the trends. I will say this about the win profile, and this is like an interesting question that I think that you'll have to just like, I'll give you the numbers and you can have your own opinion on it. They went 1-15 in their division last year.
It's a tough division.
They went 7-23 versus the Western Conference. So if you're going to build a win profile to get above your win total, you need to be able to beat teams that are worse than you. The problem is they're not going to play that many teams that are worse than them. Brooklyn's going to be worse this year than last. Even with our skepticism on the Knicks, there's a good chance the Knicks are better than last year in terms of team quality and still go under. So that's like, they could be better. They're at least going to be still way better than Toronto. Philly's going to be better, and they have to play Boston 4 times. They do have to play all those games versus the Western Conference. It's just hard for you to be able to pick up enough wins to make up for it with games versus the Southeast and the Central. And even the Central, I think, like based off of our division preview, you're higher on the Bulls than I am. I'm higher on the Pistons. So like there's a little bit of upward momentum with those teams to make that even a little bit tougher. So when we talk about team construct and how good they're going to be, I kind of agree with your premise. I think when we start actually getting into who are they going to beat, it's like you can't just play Charlotte and Detroit and Brooklyn every time. I will say you kind of mentioned this with the seeding though. That one I think is really interesting to me. Like I still have them projected under. Again, I might just bump them up once I get into preseason. But if we look at the seeding and we look at an under of minus 140, which I think is not bad. You mentioned like Detroit. I'm pretty confident that the Raptors are going to be better than Detroit. I have them projected within the same range at this point, but I feel pretty confident the Raptors are going to be better than Detroit. They're going to be better than Brooklyn. They're going to be better than the Wizards. Charlotte, I don't know about. We'll talk about them in next week's pods, and they're just like it's very difficult. So like they're not going to be one of these bottom teams. So I do think maybe there's a little bit of value on seeding. The only problem I have is like I'm actually a little bit opposite of you, where I'm like, look, if they're at 30, if they're going to go over this number, they are likely to find enough wins in March to get into the play-in tournament, because at that point it's like, screw it, why not? Plus 165, I think, is a pretty good number for play.
Yeah, but I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying if you made the play-in, you also won at least 35 games, and I'm getting twice the payout to win 35 games. Like, you don't want to risk. Like, the only way that your bet is better is if you can win 33 or 34 and make the play-in, and that's just not a number that we've seen on the board so far. It's possible in the East, but it doesn't seem likely to me.
I gotcha. Okay, Brandon's in on the Raptors. I am a wait and see on Toronto. Let's go to the Philadelphia 76ers with the biggest move of the offseason as they add Paul George. What's your 10 words for the Philadelphia 76ers?
We absolutely do not know, and you shouldn't bet it. Under 52.5, pass on all things Sixers, but I'm excited to talk about them.
Mine is, would be fun to be able to bet them. Just sucks, man. 52.5 win total. Fully healthy, I project this team at 57. I should be over. I'm not. Division is plus 390. If you want 1 Celtics, 2 Sixers, because you buy into our Knicks analysis, any order is minus 115. Their seeding is 3.5. It's juiced even -110, -110. I like that bet quite a bit for the under. 1 seed is +500. 2 seed is +380. If you want to say this will be the second best team in the East, but it's Boston and then everybody else. Play-in is 5-1, and if you want to bet against them and say no playoffs for them, because this was a play-in tournament team last season, +1,300. What's your big picture on the Sixers?
Yeah, I mean, the big picture on this one is in depth, so I'll try to keep it quick here. But obviously, last year, you trade Harden for space into the season for basically cap room, and it worked. It worked. They turned the cap room into Paul George. They totally remade their roster. You look by minutes. 3 of the top 5 guys in minutes, gone. 7 of their top 10 in minutes, gone. Tobias Harris, Paul Reed, Nick Batum, Melton, Beverly, Buddy, Morris, House, Covington, gone. All gone off the roster. This is why we don't know. There's so many changes here. You added PG. The most important thing they better hope, is not only 39 games with Joel Embiid. That's the thing you need to get. That's why we can't bet it, because we have no idea how many games of Embiid you're getting or what version of Embiid you're getting. I like to look at the roster more granular. So Paul Reed out, Andre Drummond in. I think that's about even. Close enough. Paul George, Tobias Harris, obviously PG. Caleb Martin and Eric Gordon in for Batum and Buddy. I call it relatively even. I think that's a slight downgrade to me, but you could argue Lowry and Reggie Jackson for Melton and Pat Beverly. It's a slight downgrade to me. I love Kyle Lowry, but these dudes are old. I think overall, even though the roster is totally different, I actually think the roster change is kind of like fairly even. I think it's a little bit worse on D, a little bit better on offense. Obviously, you have Paul George. We're going to disagree a little bit on what we think about him in particular. The other important thing to mention here in big picture, they signed KJ Martin to a 2-year, $16 million deal with an option. Why do I care about KJ Martin? KJ Martin is a walking trade chip. That is the only reason you give him $8 million a year with an option. There's still a move here. Daryl Morey's still cooking. They got picks. They've got Clippers picks. They got KJ Martin as clearly like a salary ballast to put into a trade. They've got Oubre maybe. They got McCain, their first round pick. There might be another move here. Like, not for a star. They've got the 3 stars now, but there might be another guy coming in that would certainly help the case. So I think this team is figuring itself out. Like, this reminds me of, obviously remember the Heat teams from the early 2010s. You got your 3 guys, and it was like, well, who else are we going to have this year? Mike Miller, come on down. Why don't you shoot some threes? Like, I feel like we're kind of there with this team. Like, all right, we brought a bunch of dudes in. Let's see what works. Let's keep shaping and moving. This is a team in progress. But at the end of the day, it's still a team that's just all about Joel Embiid and how much do we get from him.
Agree on that last point. I think it's an upgrade pretty much across the board based off of a number of factors where Paul Reed, I think, was really good in the beginning of the season, and he was like so popular with them, but the playoffs kind of found him out. And in particular, like, there was just like when Embiid went down, the league kind of found out about Paul Reed. It's like, oh yeah, no, he could be like a backup guy that gives you good minutes for a while. You didn't mention Ricky Council IV at all, and I'm offended. Ricky Council's good. They're hard to project when they're healthy, but they were legitimately as good as the Celtics early in the season. They were as good as the Celtics. The Maxey, Melton, Batum, Harris, and Embiid lineup, and that's missing. The 2 guys got replaced there, but they went 12-2 with a net rating of 34. And you're replacing Melton and Batum by PG and Caleb Martin. I like DeAnthony Melton. I like Nick Batum. I think PG and Caleb Martin together are better. Oubre had a really sneakily great season. He was 54th in offensive EPM, 76th in defensive EPM with Embiid out so much. And it was really like his minutes got worse when Embiid was out. He fits very well around Embiid. Kelly's a guy that I think everyone has very strong feelings about, and it's a little unfair. Like, he failed in Golden State. He doesn't work in emotion offense. This is the opposite of emotion offense. This is sit around and wait for the other guys to do stuff. And he's really good at that. And he makes plays. He makes high effort plays, and he's very good defensively. PG, I've got him as a plus 4.5 to power rating based off of last year. He's awesome. Like, he's just killer. I like the fit. A lot of it is that PG, one of the things with PG is that he drifts. He has moments in games and quarters where he's like, oh my God, Paul George is killing them. And then it's like, where did Paul George go? What happened? I haven't heard from him in the entire second quarter. And then the third quarter, it's like, oh my God, PG's killing him again. And then the fourth quarter is like, where's PG? Oh, there, he made 3 plays at the end. That fits very well when you have Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. You need a guy that makes plays at the right time next to those two versus Harden, who's like much more like, I am the system, right? PG is not the system. PG is a guy that fills the gaps. And I really like that as a gap between Maxey and Embiid. And he's a guy that when Embiid's out will be able to fill in a lot of those numbers. So I do like those quite a bit. What don't you like about this team?
I got to do what I do like about the team first. What I like about the team, I like Joel Embiid, a sentence I don't say very often. I like that Joel Embiid is really, really good when he plays. They were 31-8 with him on the court last year. That's half of a season, 31-8. It's pretty easy to feel like that's like a 65 win pace. They're 16-27 without. That's not great. But like you mentioned, Kelly Oubre, not a guy that I like. He kind of fits into that group of guys I mentioned earlier that I don't like. He was good last year. He was good only when Joel played. Tyrese Maxey, our most improved guy. That was a big hit for us last year. Fell off a little bit late in the year without Joel Embiid. But when Embiid was out there, the efficiency and the metrics were way up. That's good news. That's fine. This team lives and dies with Joel Embiid anyway. So it's totally fine and good if your players that you need are not great without him. You're screwed anyway. You want them to be great with him. And that's what they have right now. So look, I thought Joel Embiid was going to win MVP last year until he got hurt and deserve it. Again, not a sentence I've said super often. That's what you like about the team. You also like having a nurse and not a doc, it turns out. That's really good. Like nurses, not docs. That's much better. I like Daryl Morey. I kind of thought about just really zoomed out big picture. We've had a lot of versions of the Sixers team, right? Because Morey's always cooking, someone in, someone out. I think this might be the best version of the Sixers yet on paper. Yeah. Now, I think Jimmy Butler and James Harden were better second stars than whoever you choose, PG or Maxey, whoever the second star is. I think Butler and Harden were better second stars. The third star is definitively better, again, whichever one you choose, than any of the other Sixers teams. And most importantly, you have a better version of Embiid. You have MVP Embiid, presumably, if healthy. I'm going to transition that into what I don't like, which is I just watched Embiid play at the Olympics, and I'm not totally sure he looked quite right or healthy yet. He turns 31 in March. Health has gotten a lot better in the NBA, and where we're going with things, big men in their 30s, you don't like recover and become awesome again when things start to slide. That's not how history has taught us. I'm worried. I don't know that we're going to get only 39 games again, but I don't know that we're going to get MVP Embiid for 70 games. I don't expect that at all. Somewhere in between. And because of that, especially again, we're talking regular season here, they have to get him healthy for the playoffs. That's the only goal of the season, is get Embiid and let's say Paul George, who only plays like 60 games a year himself. They got to get those guys to the playoffs. They don't need a seed. They showed last year. They didn't care about making the play-in. They just won out of the play-in and played whoever was in front of them. They just got to get there healthy. This team might get one shot. Like, this is not going to last for long. It might be this year, it might be next year. We're only going to get those 3 stars together for an actual playoff run, maybe one time. That's how it goes when you're building on Embiid and PG. So you have to get them there healthy. From a standpoint of us, Matt, playing them as a regular season team, I don't like that because that means I have to rest Embiid. I have to rest PG. They've only finished 12th to 14th in offense in 3 of the last 4 years. This is not a high ceiling offense team. Nick Nurse has never coached a top 10 offense in 5 years coaching. He's finished just below all the times. So I think there's some ceiling capping things here. I don't love the guys they added. I'm not a Caleb Martin guy. I think that was a playoff outlier. I think Eric Gordon and Kyle Lowry and Reggie Jackson are just too many years ago. I don't think that they're ready to do a lot here. So I'm concerned. There are a lot of red flags here. With Toronto, I saw a lot of different routes for things to go well. With Philly, there's a lot of ways for things to go and not well, and that's why I'm concerned. What don't you like about Philly?
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest thing here is just, look, I gave Joel a bunch of shit for missing the game in Denver last year, and then he got hurt, and I don't want to really like relitigate all that. But like, regardless of all of that kind of stuff, it's just, there's this reality. It's really frustrating to have money on Embiid. And it's not his fault. He gets injured. He's always had injury issues. There's always been these types of things. He's had a sequence of awful luck in the playoffs where it's like face injuries and concussions and thumb injury. Like, it's a bunch of weird stuff. It's just really frustrating. And so Embiid is a guy I think you can bet. You can find ways to find value on Embiid in the moment. Oh, he's going to play? Oh, it's a good matchup? Okay, there's good value here. Versus taking any sort of like long-term proposition on him because you just don't know. You just don't know. If you told me Embiid was going to play 70 games, if you told Brandon and I Embiid was going to play 70 games, I would be an over and Brandon would be a lot more in the...
I'd be an over instantly. 70 games with Embiid, I'm in right now.
Yeah. I just can't really get there. PG's 34. PG's going to miss some time too. He's getting up there. And he's missed time with the Clippers as much as like he's more available than Kawhi. It's a low bar, and he also misses time. There's a whole new cast, so there's gonna be a lot of integration here, and that sometimes will take through December. Like I don't want the Sixers at all for in-season tournament because they're gonna be figuring out a lot of who's gonna play, who's not gonna play, who works with who, how the lineups. Like they got to figure out a lot of that stuff. They might click instantly, and they might be so good it doesn't matter. Like I'm not ruling out an over at all, but those are the concerns. I am with you on backup point guard. I just think Lowry's running out. Reggie Jackson's behind him. That's not good. Eric Gordon, kind of same deal. Like there's just like, if Maxey has to miss time, it's going to get really dicey in the backcourt. It's just going to get really dicey unless they find a fill-in and a guy that isn't really on our radar. Some key numbers. The Sixers have gone over in 3 of the last 4 years, despite all the injuries. They've still gone over. But we're back here. 52.5. If you got 52.5 or more on the win total, 32-18 to the over or to the under. 50 plus is 39-24-1 to the under. Top 3 win totals, which there's 5 teams tied for this. 3 teams that are in it and 2 teams tied. Top 3 win totals are 27 and 14 to the under last 14 seasons. Top 5 win totals are 43 and 23 to the under. You should take the under on top 5 win totals pretty routinely. So all of that's to say, like, if you decide you're just like, look, Embiid's not going to play enough games, high win totals go under. Makes sense to me. I'm not going to bet it, but I get it.
I do have one bet on the Sixers for the regular season. I want to talk through this.
All right.
So I had a bet on the Sixers in the postseason last year. We got to the playoffs. For all the things that we know how I feel about Joel Embiid and the Sixers and everything, I wrote a whole article. They're my team. This is the right bet to make going to the playoffs because it was about playing upside. Only one team, I don't know if you know this, Matt, but just one team gets to win the championship. A lot has to go right for you to win the championship. If you are betting on a title, you are betting on the outlier good to have happened. You don't need medians anymore. Not important. You need the outlier thing to happen. I would bet that again. We ended up not getting healthy Embiid. We ended up getting like 7 things happen to him in one series. When it gets to this year's playoffs, despite all the things that I've just said, I will probably look at Philadelphia because they will probably be lower on the seeding. Their odds will have slipped from where they're at right now. You want to bet the long tail on this team in either direction. So in the playoffs, you can't bet a negative long tail. There is no long tail. You're out. You're gone. There's no long tail left. You can only bet a positive long tail. You can bet them to win the title later when the odds are down if you like it. In the regular season, you have to play the other long tail. So I am betting Philadelphia to miss the playoffs. There's a 20-1 out there at a book. I think that's a bad number because if they're in range to get to the play-in like last year, there's a very good chance that they're in that range because Embiid is hurt or playing through injury or missing. And if he's hurt or not able to return, they're not a sure thing to get out of the play-in either. So my odds are getting even better at that point. I don't think it's going to happen. This is not like a full unit bet. This is a nibble, but I think it gives me a good position for later in the season. I think 20-1 is the wrong number for a team that is a very volatile lineup. Because of Joel, I have to play them to miss the playoffs 20-1.
Okay. Here's my issue. You're right where you're like, well, if they're in the play-in and Embiid's hurt, they still might get out.
They might.
So here's the thing. You're with me on this, I would assume, that there is not a scenario, unless Embiid misses the entire season, that they're going to finish 10th, right? Like they would
miss the play-in entirely is what you're saying?
No, I'm saying finish 10th or worse. So if we can kind of look at the teams here, and we look at how those teams kind of stack up.
Right.
We can go ahead and
Basically, what you're asking is the East 7 to 12 range. The teams we've been talking about, the Raptors, the Bulls, the Hornets, like those teams. How bad would the Sixers have to be to finish below a bunch of those teams? Real bad. Like, yeah, you're talking to Embiid missing a huge chunk of the season to get there. So now you're probably in the play-in with the home game or two, and that's kind of what you're trying to say, yeah?
Yeah, so my big thing here is that 10 seed teams are 0 in making the playoffs.
Right.
They don't win, right? The 8th and 9th seeds are 500, and the 7 seeds almost always make it. So my big differential with you here is that you're factoring in, even if they make it in the play-in, they could still get out. And the answer is probably no. Like the most likely outcome of that is that they're like an 8 seed and heavily favored in the second game.
Yeah.
And that to me is why I don't like it. Like I need there to be a thicker outcome where they just miss the playoffs entirely. And with this piece of shit conference, that is not happening.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I'm banking a little bit on maybe motivation that would not be there, which is if Embiid is just straight out, that maybe they kind of pull the plug on the season, or in a play-in game, you're maybe not as motivated to like, well, what do we want to make the playoffs and get crushed by the Celtics? Maybe that's not how NBA players think, and maybe that's not a good way to think through it. But I mean, I've done the Miami Heat miss playoffs bet where they're like right at the 6, 7, 8 seed. Like this is tradition. I got to have a team in this range. The Suns last year, I need my CLV ticket to sit on all year and never cash, but look so juicy as it gets there. This is it. This is the one.
Hey, look, be proud of me because I'm not the one that's like, oh yeah, let's take that and then hedge it. I'm like, no, there's no reason. You're just gonna get a minus number. You're gonna have to pay through the nose on Sixers to win the play-in tournament games. Don't do that. Let's just pass on it. This seems a pass for me. We talked a lot about it because they are really interesting.
They are.
But I just can't give out any sort of like, yeah, you should do this. Like, how am I gonna do that? Let's move to the Boston Celtics, who made us a ton of money on the regular season last year. It was one of our strongest plays. We love this team last year. It's not that we don't like them this year, but I'm curious, what's your 10 words on the Celtics?
The Juggernaut champs are running it back. I would take an over 58.5, but it's a pass. I do have a couple other plays in the Celtics we'll get to.
Made my money on them last year. I'm a lean over as well. All right. 58.3 is the average. There's still 157.5 in the market, but everything else is going up. This is going to hit 50. Like there's a very good chance it hits 59.5 by the time that we get to the opener of the night of the season. And that's the woof. 60 plus wins is only plus 120. Just, it's hard to win 60 wins. It's very hard to win twice in a row. I'll go into that later. Division is minus 180. Seeding 1.5. The over is plus 105, which means that they are minus 125 to be the number 1 seed. If you want most wins in the regular season between both conferences, so the number 1 seed overall, it's plus 175 in the market currently. Missed playoffs, if you want to go the exact opposite way, is only plus 2,500. I assume there's a lot here. I'll let you go first on big picture, and you can tell me what you like as well.
Yeah, I mean, really big picture, there's not a lot to say. We kind of know the big picture, right? Everybody's back. We're running it back. We won the championship. Everyone's back. The entire top 9 of the rotation is back. Look, there are things coming. The big picture down the line is Al Horford's getting old. We're getting expensive. We're over the second apron. That's tomorrow's problem. We'll figure that out next year. That's not going to affect this year. This year, we're all in. I'm defending the title. Kristaps Porzingis is injured. There's your first warning sign. That's the first, like, look, you're the champs now. You got the target, and everything can't go quite perfectly. Now, look, I don't really know that things even went perfectly last year. I don't know that they had any real, like, outlier. I mean, they caught a lot of breaks from other teams in the playoffs, certainly. Yeah. Themselves, I don't think they had, like, an outlier season from any particular player. I don't think they had necessarily outlier shooting. I felt like they kind of played what they were supposed to. We were high on this team for a reason last year. They just got a nice platter when they got to the playoffs. What do we like? They've had a top 10 offense 6 years in a row. Joe Mazzulla's been there 2 years. They've had a top 2 offense both years. They were number 2. Then they went to number 1. They started bombing threes. They added Porzingis, so they add the spacing there. They subtracted Marcus Smart and Grant Williams. That turns out to help the offense as well. The depth fits. You got Hauser. You got other guys come in shooting the threes. Joe Mazzulla gets a lot of crap, but I think as a regular season coach especially, he has given them an identity. This team bombs threes, and I don't care how many we just missed, we're going to keep on shooting them, and that has built them into a juggernaut offense. The Celtics that we think of for years have been a defense team that does enough on offense. That's kind of how we think about even like Tatum and Brown a little bit. That is not what this team is. This is the number one offense in the NBA. They're good on defense. You have Drew Holiday and Derek White, and you're not a defensive team. You're an offensive team. That's why they're so good. They were top 7 on defense 6 of the last 7 years. They're top 3, both Missoula years. Guess what, Matt? If you're top 2 on offense and top 3 on defense, you're real good. You win a lot of games. And as to the Porzingis injury, he was 8th in minutes on the Celtics last year. He might be their best player, I think. Most important player, I think. They didn't even get much Porzingis last year. They're going to lose some of him this year. They already lost some of him last year. I like everything about the Celtics. I wore Celtics green. We can't bet the over because it's a ridiculous number, but like my first win total projection had them at like 68 wins. I had to keep bumping them down just to get to something more realistic. They're real good. I like real good.
The actual thing I like best about them is that the Boston Celtics are the most consistent team in basketball. So in the regular season, it is way better for you to be a team that you know what you're getting every night and your guys are not bored by it. There's just a lot of veteran teams that compete for championships the way the Celtics do, that their effort will wax and wane. The Celtics have so few they didn't have at nights. And that's so frustrating as a bettor when you know the team is better and you know you got an edge on the line. And then the team is just like, I don't know, it's January. I don't wanna. Talking to you, Denver Nuggets. Like, the Celtics are extremely consistent in their performance. They bring it every single night. That's a testament not only to Joe Mazzulla, but this was true under Udoka and Stevens before him. The Celtics, as a team, with Jason Tatum as the primary player alongside Jalen Brown, they compete every night. Some of that's the age, is that those guys are still hungry and they're still going for things, but this team does not take nights off. There's no reason to think that after winning the title, they'll do that at this point in their careers. It's more likely than it was last season that they'll have more nights where they're like, man, I've been playing basketball nonstop for 13 months. I'm tired. That's possible, but I'm not going to bet on that because there's nothing in the profile that suggests it. Here's some numbers for you. Yeah, they were 6 and 7 in 3-point games. They didn't even get lucky. Because how about this one, Brandon? They had 42 double-digit wins.
They won. That's more than half the season.
Half of the season they won by double digits. I project them to be 18-9 in the games where KP misses, if he misses a third of the season. And I saw that and was like, I don't think that that's likely. I'm going to bump that up to probably 21-6. Last season without KP, they went 21-4 without Kristaps Porzingis.
They won an entire playoff run without Kristaps Porzingis. Yeah. They beat all the teams without him, basically.
I'll talk about what I don't like. There is a cost of greatness here in terms of the games played. Jason Tatum is tied with Nikola Jokic for the most games played since 2019, and he leads in most games played since the bubble. Now, he didn't have necessarily a stressful summer with Team USA, but look, he did have to practice and he did have to go and travel and do all that. Like, he didn't just sit around on a yacht in the Mediterranean and hang out. So there's that. Drew's getting up there in age. Drew, if we're going to be real here, there's some signs that Drew wasn't as good last year overall, and he just had an extremely good shooting year. He shot 43%. That's a career high from 3. Now, he got great looks and knocked down corner threes, right? And they won the title because of that, and we love the move for them and all that. Like, Drew's awesome. Everyone universally loves Drew Holiday, both as a player and as a person. It's reasonable to be like, yeah, they might not be as good there. I talked about in the Thunder, in the Northwest Division preview, and with Joel Lorenzi on our deep dive about the Thunder, about the shooting regression that's possible for OKC. It is similarly possible with the Celtics because they have the same kind of profile where they actually don't take very great. Their profile is not awesome in terms of how they generate shots, but they bomb a lot of threes, like Brandon said, and they shoot a really high percentage. I will say I like OKC's mechanism of generating shots much more than I like Boston's. But Boston's been, like Brandon said, a top 2 offense every year. So there's no way I can really come on here and be like, they're going to be significantly worse. I can't do it. However, a little bit of a slide with a win total this high, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, maybe they're at 60 instead of 65 because of shooting regression. And then injuries slide you to 57. And like, that's how we get here on this. What don't you like about the Boston Celtics?
Yeah, not much. Really, the things you said. 3-point regression is out there. I think Drew is fading. I agree. Al Horford is getting old, can only give you so much. Those guys both have been good. They're just good for what they can give you at their age. Turns out not everyone can be LeBron, right? Yeah, everybody else ages. The big thing for me is Porzingis. To me, if something goes really badly for the Celtics this year, whatever the worst bad version is, I think has to involve Porzingis just never really quite getting healthy. And we've seen that from him in the past. I think he's past it now. But like, what if we just get like 25 games of Porzingis? He misses. It's out a little longer than you think. He comes back a couple weeks later. He kind of re-injures the injury. There's not a lot of great depth on the big man chart. There are playable guys. I like Xavier Tillman. I like Nemish Keita. Those are like playable third big men. Those are not dudes that can be a starting center or even close to it. Al Horford is fantastic. Al Horford was my 6th man of the year last year. He's fantastic for what he is. He's a 6th man for a reason. Like, you can only put so much on him. Al Horford gets a lot worse if you have to play him as a starter the entire season or much of it because Porzingis is out. To me, I'm a little more worried about the defense than the offense. If I had to pick one, because of Porzingis. Because if you don't have that rim protection and your big man rotation behind you is not quite there, and I agree with you, like maybe take a couple of nights off or not quite as locked in. They're the target. Everyone's coming for the Celtics now. You got the target on your back. You lose the hunger a little bit. I do think it slips a little bit. You got tired legs. Not just Tatum at the Olympics. Obviously, White and Holiday are at the Olympics. They go to Abu Dhabi in the preseason. I never loved that. It's not quite China. I know we talked about like China, you get a lot of appearances and everything, but just we've been traveling. Like, we've been around. It'd be nice to just give these guys a couple of weeks. You know, like take a couple of days off here. I don't love another travel tour, etc. Time change, all of that. It's not much. I like, despite all of that, I have the Celtics number 1 offense, number 6 defense. I have them net rating plus 7.5 after downgrading them 2 times, a 60-win team.
Yeah.
They are expected to win the last 3 years, 59, 57, 66. They've been at a 49 win pace or better 6 of the last 7 seasons. And the funny thing about that is that would be disappointing to only win 49 games. Oh no, not a 5 in front of our number. What a terrible season we had. That's like a bottom 10 percentile Celtics outcome. They're going to win a lot of games. Even if things go a little bit bad, I think they're still going to win a lot of games this year. Well, you've got trends, I know, for when we get the highest win total on the board. What do you got?
Yeah, okay. I got a bunch of options for you here for pick which of these is your indicator that you should take the under on this and ignore all the basketball stuff. The top 3 win totals are 27 and 14 to the under. The top win total overall in the last 14 seasons is 9 and 5 to the under. So if you just took the top number on the board and bet the under, you would be profitable at 9 and 5. Win totals of 55 plus are 19 and 10 to the under. Teams that went 60 plus wins and they've got a win total of 50 plus the next season, there's only 8 of them, 5 and 3 to the under. This one's maybe my favorite though, Brandon. It's a smaller sample, but teams that won 60 plus games are 10 and 4 to the under the following season, including the last 7 straight. The last 7 straight times a team has won 60, they've gone under their win total the following season. Top 5 win totals are 42 and 23 to the under. Here's a good one. Teams with a top 3 win total who won the title. I went back and looked at this.
Okay.
7 and 3 to the under. So that's like the look here is that basically every single trend tells you there's going to be regression and it's impossible to win that. It's hard to win this many games back-to-back seasons. That 60 plus is just extremely difficult to do back-to-back seasons. My big kind of like concluding thought on this is last year we felt like this was a great chance to catch the books off guard because they could not put them high enough. They haven't moved this win total significantly over last year. It was 55.5 last year. We're headed towards 58.5 now. But the problem is the books can't really get there. It's not that I don't like an over. I do like an over for all the basketball side, but the trends are enough for me to be like, look, yeah, it looks like it's all going to make sense, but sports are messy, and doing this twice in a row, I would feel dumb being like, I nailed it last year, and I'm going to, like you said, they're just going to do it again. That's very difficult to do. I'm not going to bet against them for that, but I'm just like, if somebody if they were just completely new to betting and were like, hey, I'm thinking about the Celtics, do you like over or under? I'd be like, over. Absolutely. 100%. If they ask me why I should bet, I'd be like, do not bet it. I don't think that there's reason to go against the trends this hard here, given the history of it. The basketball says over. The trends overall, they're team agnostic, say under.
So I do have two ways I'm thinking about betting, and I want to talk them through, and you can tell me what you think of it. You mentioned the division odds. I see a minus 165 at BetMGM. That's, I think, the best line out there. That's a 62% implied. Now, look, we just talked about the Knicks and the Sixers. We're both under on the Knicks. We're fading the Sixers by not playing them, but I clearly am under them. I bet them to miss the playoffs. I have them floating around 50 wins, both of those teams. I have the Celtics at 60 wins. I make Boston something around minus 500 to win the division. Look, I don't try to do a lot of bets at minus 165 for 9 months. That's not really the way I play things. But Matt, some of the best trades I made in the playoff last year was those like juiced up Celtics bets where I just set it and forget it and made my money later. I like that. If you want to play a juiced bet, if you want to get a win on the board, I think that's good. If you want to play a couple divisions and add that one in to juice your parlay a little bit, I would normally not be one telling you to do that. You don't need extra variables. I don't think this is really a variable. I have it very, very likely. It's hard to remember a more likely division winner for me. So I like that. The one I do like for sure that I'm playing is you can bet most wins in the NBA at BetMGM, just best record in the NBA, plus 200. Now, go back and listen to our Northwest podcast. We talked about the Thunder already. My thesis about the Thunder literally was they are not Celtics West. I don't have the Thunder up in the 60-win range. I have them at 54. I have the Cavs at 54. I've got a few teams in the low 50s. I don't have anyone within 6 wins of my twice downgraded Celtics team. 200 is not a great number, but it's much, much better than playing the over. So, put it this way. Do not play an over 58.5. If you win 59 games, you have a very strong chance of having the most wins in the NBA, which is 2-to-1 odds and more than double your payout. If you like the over and you just need to get something down, bet most wins, and now you're getting a much better payout for your bargain there. Now, I know you're getting more variables, but what do you think about Celtics division juiced or Celtics most wins plus 200? You're muted.
I just said I don't want to bet it, and you're making me want to bet it. I don't want to bet it. I mean, I got to think on it. Honestly, I got to think on it. Brandon likes the plus 200. I can't deny it's a great number. It makes a lot of sense.
I think if you are thinking, you're higher on the Thunder than I am. So I think if you're thinking about it, then I'm definitely betting it.
So I'm higher on the Thunder, but I'm also higher, I think, on the Sixers and Knicks tail end, where it's like, if a bunch of stuff goes wrong. Here's the thing. If stuff goes wrong for Boston, it's not like, oh, well, Jason Tatum missed 40 games and they were fine. Like, that's not how this works, right? So, like, there are things that can get this significantly down to, like, sub 55. And once we get to sub 55, I think there's a number of teams that can get over them.
Sure, of
especially
course.
in the Western Conference. So I can't bet it. I just realized that. Like, I can't bet it because I got too many teams within that range. But I do, like, it's definitely a good bet at plus 200.
All right, let's talk about our favorite team, the Brooklyn Nets.
All right, we're going to do this very quickly. I'm going to go first. 10 words for the Brooklyn Nets or less. Gag for flag. That's it. This team's got it. This team has to tank. They have to. Under 19.5 is a 3-unit bet for me. What's yours?
Straight up told us they're tanking. I'm under 19.5, but it's a pass. I don't need it. I don't need to bet in the Nets. I don't need to think about the Nets. I don't want to talk about them anymore after like the next 4 minutes of Nets.
All right, I'll set the stage. 19.9. There was a 21.5 in the market on Sunday night, and I wrote that down in my log for how I'm tracking these win totals and didn't check to see that was so off of the market. And I wish I had. That number is now 18.5. People hit that number so hard at one book, they moved it below market consensus. Play-in is 12-1. Playoffs are 30-1. I'm sorry, that's wrong. 300-1. 14.5 over is plus 115. Under is minus 140 for the total. So basically, like, last in conference is plus 115. That's a pretty good bet. I will let you give the spiel on why the Nets have to tank so hard this season.
Yeah, I mean, look, they had the big trade in the offseason. They traded for their own picks back, right? They made a big move to get the rights to this year's draft pick, first round, and next year's first round pick from Houston. They got their picks back now. So they do not have a 2027 pick. There's still owe swap rights for that. So they're going to lose that one. They effectively created a 2-year tanking window. They went and got their own picks because they want to lose a lot of games and get Cooper Flag or a number of other players. This is a loaded draft at the top with stars. This team needs it. They ain't got any stars. They've not had picks. There are no young players. There's nobody to develop here on the roster into like anything close to a star. That's a little weird to me from a tanking standpoint, because normally you tank by just playing your young guys and you lose a lot. They got like some veterans and like dudes that actually might want to do some stuff. So that's a little strange. But from the roster last year, they lost their leading minutes. They've lost 6, 7, 8, and 9 in minutes individually. 4 and 5 is DFS and Cam Johnson. They're probably going to be gone at some point this year. So that's 7 out of your top 9 basically from last year. Like there's nothing left. The cupboard is empty. The cupboard has $40 million of Ben Simmons in it. That's what's in the cupboard right now. Now, in a normal team that might not tank, I might think, well, maybe you trade Ben Simmons. That's an expiring deal. Maybe you trade and you pick up a Zach LaVine or a contract someone else wants to unload. I don't think they're going to do it. They clearly want to tank. That's why you make a trade like that. What do you like about the Nets? Do you have any bullet points of things you like about the Nets?
I actually project them slightly over based off of players won and lost. I mean, part of this is just that, like, they do have some guys. Like Cam Thomas can be a bad NBA player and still have a baseline floor where it's like, no, he's going to be in the league in 3 years.
Yeah.
They have got, like, I like Daron Sharp. I thought he made real strides last year. They kept Nick Claxton. Nick Claxton's really good. Like, I don't understand re-signing him and not doing a sign and trade. I don't understand it. I just don't get it. If you made the decision where you did, I don't understand. Like, Claxton's just going to sit there and be wasted. Maybe they trade him at the deadline, but I'm just like, why, guys? Like, you're just wasting a year of this guy's career, and he's really good and valuable at this point in his career. That's it. That's all I got. That is it. The rest of this roster is not good. It's just very. I guess here's the bigger problem. There's no structure because there's no player to build around, and you can't really design a system around the players that they have in place that makes sense. They're just like a bunch of guys playing, and that's just not going to be like, that's a formula. And like you said, like, they're not subtle. I'll go ahead and go into what I don't like. You mentioned it, like, they just have the most motivation. They need to win. Their target would be 15 wins this season. If they won 15 games, they'd be completely happy. 15 wins, get the number 1 lottery spot, hope that you will look out and get Flag. If you don't, get Ace Bailey. There's Harper. There's a bunch of guys at the top. They cannot get the number 1 pick and still get the guy that they need to go forward and actually build something around him. Dennis Smith Jr. was their best EPM player last season.
Yep.
They left him unsigned. This is not subtle. Like, you could get DSJ for nothing, and they're still like, nope, we're good, thanks. Everyone's trade bait. Cam Johnson, DFS, Daron Sharp they were in talks with Daron Sharp with the Memphis Grizzlies, reported on that. Like, they are in on moving pretty much everybody. If someone would take Ben Simmons, you can bet they would be like packing there'd be a speed packing that would go on. Yeah, that's what I got. Like, do you really need to go over what you don't like about this team? Like, do we need to go in depth on it?
I mean, I do think there's a little bit more floor in offense than it seems at first. Because you said, yeah. Cam Thomas is solid. Cam Thomas can score points somewhat efficiently, enough to create some offense. They've got Bojan, who was terrible last year, but I think can also do that. They want to play Bojan. They want to play Dennis Schroeder, FIBA first team All-Olympics, Dennis Schroeder. you want these guys to look good because then you're going to flip them. So I think that the floor offensively actually makes them something more like the 24th offense instead of the 30th offense. You accidentally win games a couple times when that happens. So I do think like that's why I don't need to play this, because I think there are some guys that actually make them not abjectly horrible, like Washington or other teams that we will get to. I do think the defense will be very bad. Claxton is great, but they lost DSJ. They lost Lonnie Walker, who was really good defensively last year. They traded Royce O'Neal. I think the defense will be very bad. Yeah, it's bad. There's nothing here. I have them bottom 4 offense, bottom 4 defense. I have them at 18 wins. Last 3 years, they've gone under by 5.5, 5.5, and 12.5. So guess what? They're trying to win games those years. They were trying to actually be a real team and still went under by 5, 5, and 12. They're trying to lose now. So the only note I will say is this. I've kind of alluded to this. I don't think I've seen the market, but you can play worst record. You can play that team to get the number 1 ping pong balls. I don't want the Nets. I'm not playing that when it comes out. I think there is some veteran competence here and a lack of youth. There are other teams, Washington. There are other Washingtons that I think are much, much worse players on the roster than what the Nets have. I just don't need to bet them. I don't need to bet them for worst record either.
The dead last team, which the Nets are in win total, is 6-5 to the over in the last 11 seasons. So it's not a big, like, one flips and this is 5-6, but
Sure.
It is not the team that's expected to be worst does not always go under. Bottom 3 is 17-15 to the under. So again, it's like, all right, it's mixed results. Win totals of less than 20. There have not been many. They are 3-3 in full 82 game seasons. There was 5 of them in the 2012 lockout season. They went 3-2 to the over in that season. So like, it's hard for me to kind of get a thing on the Nets here because it's just like, there's not many teams that are expected to be this bad. And the Nets, they have to be terrible. There's no, if this, let me put it this way. The front office is going to freak out if this team wins 6 out of 10 games at any point in this season.
Yeah. What?
Like,
let me ask this. The one thing I had this on my what I like. I kind of like Jordy Fernandez. He coached the Canadian team. I kind of think he might be good. What if he's Will Hardy, and what if they accidentally like put some stuff in place and are kind of competent early? What do you do?
Jordy's got a great reputation. He was successful in SAC and in Denver. Like everyone loves Jordy. Everyone loves Jordy, and I'm very happy that he's gotten this opportunity given how people feel about him. I actually, off of Team Canada, kind of wanted to go the other way and be like, yeah, I don't know. He might be better as an assistant and not as a lead. This is a first-time head coach with not the worst roster in the league, but a roster that deliberately is built to not be. I think here's a good way to put it. You mentioned like there's some veteran guys. The problem is like none of them make sense. There's not a structure here. There's like, how do you build an offense here? Cam Thomas, Nick Claxton pick and roll with DFS spotting up Ben Simmons if he comes back. Like, there's no way to build.
You just give Cam Thomas the ball and let him cook. That's the offense. Let him put up 50 a night.
There's no way to build a system. So anyway, I'm going to bet the under on this team because they got to miss. If they don't, then I'm going to be like, well, sometimes stuff happens. All right, let's go to wrap it up for this episode of Buckets. Thanks for joining us. My thanks to David Payne and Hutton Jackson. Get us up at youtube.com/The Action Network. We'll be back on Wednesday where we'll do our deep dives for this week. We will do the Boston Celtics and we will do the Phoenix Suns this week as a deep dive. So make sure to check out that Wednesday episode. Friday, we'll be back with a Pacific Division episode. You can follow Brandon in the Action Network app. We'll see you guys again later. Till then, let's get buckets.